the courage that an international student brings to essentially get on a plane and in many cases alone, come to the United States on their own and come to a place that they've never been and study. It's hard to even put into words how much bravery you have to just do that. And so that for me was like, wow, I want to help these students. Like, I want to be there for them and make sure that their experience is the best experience it could possibly be.
Hello and welcome again to all our listeners to another fabulous episode of EDU Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, your host. And here at this podcast, we talk to leaders in education, leaders in enrollment who are not just shaping the lives of students at their own institution, not just shaping their own institution's operations, but also contributing to just higher education in general, helping grow higher education by figuring out better ways and means to deliver education. And joining us today is one such really special guest, not just our customer, but a very close friend of mine, a mentor at the beginning stages of my life as an entrepreneur in this space, Michelle Kowalsky, Goodfellow, the Assistant Vice President for Enrollment at Western New England University in Massachusetts. Michelle, welcome to my podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be a part of your journey. And it's been exciting to watch as everything has grown.
Oh, yes, and so much. You've seen it actually, right? You've seen iSchool, from its inception, like when it was born, and I drove up to your school to meet with you, gave me time. You've seen it come all the way here to like I was just telling Michelle when we started, I'm like, Michelle, how do you see this from a one-person team to now we have a podcast studio?
Pretty amazing. It's awesome to see.
So it's been great to just be, in touch with you for the last 6, 7, 8 years now, and just kind of pick up the phone and call you at any time to say, hey, how do you do these things? Is this a product that the industry would like, that a school would like, and always having a sounding board with you. So it's kind of like a full circle of now having you on the podcast. Uh,
Absolutely.
so amazing. I just want to give our listeners a quick introduction. Many of y'all already know Michelle. She's there at most conferences, NAFSA. She's been the chair of Study Massachusetts, which is a conglomerate of all the Massachusetts schools. She has her focus on international education as well. She looks at that very keenly, and that's been my focus as well for the last 6 or 7 years, other than technology and all the other things that I try to keep myself busy with. But international is a big deal. But also, Michelle, I know you're instrumental in creating the You Are Welcome Here scholarship and kind of making Western New England part of that. And I want to really talk about that. I think out of everything, that's one thing I've never talked to you about,
Mm.
right? On the thoughts around it and everything. So I'm just looking forward to everything in this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to talk about that. I mean, it really kind of came at a time when there were a number of things happening in the US political system, I would say, that really made those of us that were working with international students a bit nervous, just in terms of how international students would see the US as a destination and whether or not there would be this fear of, are we really welcoming to international students and do we really want them here? And so a group of us came together and said, let's be the voice of the large group of us across the United States that really are dedicated to international students and see the immense value that they bring to our campuses, to say in a unified way, like, you are welcome here. We want you here. And not just from a financial standpoint, but we see so much more of the breadth and the depth of what you bring to our campuses. So it was really kind of a passion project for those of us that decided to kind of dip in and say, like, all right, let's make this happen.
That's amazing. And then, I mean, that passion project now turned into like what, 50 plus schools that are now seriously involved that give out scholarships every year to, and it's especially for international students, right? These scholarships.
Exactly. Yeah,
Tremendous.
and I think for some of the schools, I mean, I was very lucky here at Western New England that we were already committed to international students. We were already giving pretty sizable scholarships to international students, but there were other institutions that didn't give international students any scholarships at all. And so this was a way in which they could agree to be part of a movement in some ways with some financial backing behind it.
Mm.
So it allowed them to do some things that were very different than what they had been doing in the past, which I think added a lot of value to many schools and a lot of opportunity for a number of international students as well.
That's amazing. I mean, coming from, a little bit of my background and how I came, but without that full ride, I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Wouldn't have contributed to the space. So I mean, yeah, there are international students who have the money to spend, right? Who have parents who are well off, but scholarships like that are very helpful for those deserving students who will add a lot of value to the economy here, right?
Absolutely. Well, because at the end of the day, somebody's knowledge, their skill set, their energies, their passions are not dependent upon how much money their family has, and it shouldn't be. So to provide opportunities to students who otherwise, like you said for yourself, that wouldn't have had those types of opportunities, I think it just adds so much more. And a lot of times for those students, there's more drive when they get here because
Yeah.
they recognize that this wasn't something that was guaranteed to them in any way.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Does any student come to mind in terms of like somebody who was unable to, and then thanks to a scholarship like that, was able to come here?
Yeah, there have been many, honestly, over the
I'm
years.
sure. Yeah, I'm
I
sure
mean,
they're all thankful.
there have definitely been a number of students that I can think of who came to Western New England based on a scholarship. So one in particular that I think about, it's a student who was from Russia. So this student actually was a transfer student. I had been in Russia and was at a college fair. She was my interpreter. So she
Oh,
was just there working, and she wound up at the table with me, interpreting everything I was saying to the students that I was trying to recruit. Not trying to recruit her, obviously, because
uh,
she was working.
yeah.
I was kind of trying to recruit her.
That's amazing.
But she afterwards, like we stayed in touch just because when we had downtime, I was asking her about her life and
Sure.
just getting
Yeah.
to know her. So we stayed in touch, and it was probably a year later that she reached out to me and said, I remember the scholarships you were talking about. I would be a transfer student and I'm really interested. And ultimately, she wound up here. And then she actually worked for me in our office as well after she was here. And so it was just an amazing opportunity to see somebody who, she never thought when she was working at the fair and met me that she would come to the United States. Like that was never in her plans. But standing there hearing about this opportunity for a scholarship and how this could actually potentially work for her family ignited something in her that then ultimately got her here. And she graduated from Western New England. She went on to get a master's degree and is doing very well. So, it was what those are the experiences, when you see it happen in an individual level for a student that
Yeah.
again, it's not something that she ever thought she would do.
What an amazing story. I mean, and the fact that she came there, got a scholarship, and worked again at your office, like that would have been a very touching moment for you. Yeah, and I know you're a personable, you're a social person, and you care a lot about the people around you. I see that, and yeah, I mean that's amazing. Yeah, there's so many of these little stories, right, of students who have come here, and some of them are now running some of the top companies in the US. But right, it's amazing. And was that all a reaction to some of the changes that were happening in the States, with a change in government administration and some other things that that was kind of deterring international students from looking at the US? Was
It
that an angle too? Yeah.
it definitely was. I think that again, it was just something where, myself and a couple of the other people that were highly involved in putting together the You Are Welcome Here scholarship were really just concerned, and we were seeing it actively happening. I mean, to be honest with you, I have the conversations right now where there are students that are saying things like, am I going to be safe? There are students that are concerned about leaving to go home over the holiday break and coming back. And I'm assuring them, like, we will make sure and do everything that we can to make sure that nothing stands in the way of that, because there are so many of us. I think unfortunately that sometimes the rhetoric that's heard is just the loudest voice, but it doesn't mean that it's the majority of the voices.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so I think it's important that for those of us that in a lot of ways are a large group, that we make sure that our voice is heard by the international students as well. And it's not just that one top voice, or that one predominant voice that they're hearing that may seem to be counter to what many of us are saying in maybe smaller groups, but to unite as one group to say, we do value this. We do see the impacts that you bring to us, and we want that to continue.
That's amazing. Michelle, I mean, it all sounds and feels like it comes from the heart, right? And I've heard this from you. Your body language is always like that. You're thinking deeply about these things. Where's this routed from? How did you end up in this field, in this industry, and be someone who's so carefully thinking about everything student?
So it's really interesting. I feel like there are some people that will say, oh, well, I was brought up where I was traveling abroad and I had all this exposure. That is not my story at all. Um, I grew up in New
The
Jersey,
general.
and just your average family. Like, we were not traveling abroad. Nobody was doing that. And I was the first in my family to go to college.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yep. And so when I was in school, I had the opportunity to get to know some international students that became close friends of mine. I worked in admissions and loved that. So when I graduated, I had a degree in elementary education and decided, I don't think that I want to go into education. Like, I think, or at least not into teaching small children. I think I want to do more of this
The hard
admissions
to
thing.
deal
Like, I
with.
like this. Yeah, yeah. I have one of my own. I'm good with one.
You're good. Yeah.
But so I thought, let me continue to do this admissions thing.
Mhm.
And the person who at the time, at the school that I was working at, who was in charge of international admission, went on maternity leave. And I said, you know what? Let me take that on. Like, I'm interested. I just want to kind of do this and see, I want to learn all about this. And so that's what I did. I learned about the process. I learned about, I-20s and immigration rules and all of these various things that I had no frame of reference for whatsoever.
Mhm.
I had studied abroad for, 10 days in college, so not really.
Yeah.
Um, and then I wound up taking a job up here where I am currently at Western New England. And at that time, it was just in regular admission, but I was like, I have international experience, kind of. Um,
Yeah.
and so it just kind of evolved where when I initially started here, international was not a part of my role.
Yeah.
Somebody again left and I took it on, and it just had this passion for it because I just thought it was so interesting, and so intriguing to see that the courage that an international student brings to essentially get on a plane and, in many cases, alone, come to the United States on their own and come to a place that they've never been and study. It's
Yeah.
it's hard to even put into words how much bravery you have to just do that. And so
Yeah.
that for me was like, wow, I want to help these students. Like, I want to be there for them and make sure that their experience is the best experience it could possibly be. Um,
It's
and
amazing.
then as it continued, I ultimately had the amazing opportunity to start traveling because Western New England started to kind of invest a little bit more as they saw it growing a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and
Yeah,
I
the curve started going from zero upwards, and yeah, after you joined. Okay, yeah, that's great.
Exactly, exactly. And so I started traveling, and those experiences have changed my life. I mean, I feel like I have such a deeper appreciation for the world and the people in it. Because although there are places, I mean, I've been to India a number of times, and I remember the first experience, I was like, wow, this is so different than what I am used to. Like, wow.
Yeah, you get off the plane and suddenly all your senses go, there's a lot of smell, sound, taste.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was just like, where am I? Like, wow. Uh, but at the same time, then when you start to really talk to the people
Yeah.
and have those one-on-one engagements, you kind of start to realize that at the end of the day, we all have these core things that are really important to us. And it
Mhm.
doesn't matter whether you grew up in India or in Russia or in the United States or, anywhere else in the world. There are some core things that really kind of drive us all. And when you focus on those things, it helps you to then see things in a better light, that it's just genuine humanity of, okay, if I put myself in that person's shoes, they get off the plane and are in a completely brand new place. Like, what would I want?
Mhm.
What would be important to me? And let me stop looking at this through this lens of, well, this is what the domestic students are doing, or, well, this is, what they should expect because it's what we told them. Well, okay, if you were in that situation, what would you want?
Yeah, absolutely. I I can totally relate to that because as a student, I thought I was fully prepared for the US and for America and a new life, and then I land in Boston and it felt like I've not done any preparation. Like everything's new. Yeah, everything feels new, and I'm like, what have I done? I went to Bentley, right? So we have this habit of calling it suburban or metropolitan Boston, right? So for me, it's always Boston, Boston, Boston. But then I land and it's Waltham, it's like it's like
What?
all predominantly blue collar. Like I'm like, oh wow, did I make a mistake? Like, what is this? Like, but then you still slowly start embracing it, and the institution plays a big role in that. Like the fact that they had those initial commencement and all the other things that they did, the international student services guys did. You all do a lot. You'll actually do it way better than honestly what I got. Sorry, Bentley. But but when I was there at Western New England, there was a Diwali party going on and there were fireworks and everything. It was pretty amazing. I mean, it just brings students together. I loved it. I loved it.
Yeah. Well, and I will say that I think a lot of that, though, too, is driven by the students because, we want to make sure. So it's one thing for me to sit here, or any of us here on campus to sit there and say, okay, well, we're going to plan X, Y, and Z. And I was having a conversation with our students just the other day where they were talking about some of the events and things. And I said, you guys, if I would just sat here and said, here's what I'm going to plan, you would all probably be like, Michelle, that sounds terrible. Like, we don't want that. That's not what we're interested in doing. And I just said to them, like, we want you to do the things that are important to you and that you're passionate about, because I'm passionate about you being here and having a good experience. But that means that you then have to tell me what it is that you want to do. So, like, from an events perspective, like that event that you saw, I don't want to take any credit for that. And I don't think that anybody here should, because it was really driven by those students who said, we want to do this. And we just supported them in making it happen.
Yeah. But you know what you definitely should take credit for is when I was there and everything we just spoke about, the way it kind of came together is the Diwali party was for all the international students, and there was a time when there were no international students there. They were
Totally.
united, they helped each other a lot. even the food came from a restaurant that was started by an Indian student and alum of the institution. So talk about helping them getting jobs and then, that whole circle of life. You should definitely take credit for that because that was an amazing thing to learn. Uh,
Absolutely.
talking about it. Yeah, it's amazing.
Oh, yeah. It's been incredible to see it grow here, because obviously I'm very passionate about it. We were just, again, having a conversation with the students, and somebody had asked a question. Basically, there was a conversation around them having an advocate. And I said to them, I said, you should never feel like you need to have an advocate. It should always feel like here at Western New England that everybody cares about you as a person. So yes, they value your experience as an international student and they recognize that that has some differences, but it doesn't mean that they should treat you any differently than the domestic student. So if the domestic student has a problem, they're going to help them address it. And if you as an international student have a problem, they're going to address it. And it should never feel like you only have one person who is your sole person that's going to advocate for you. And that, basically we were making sure that they understood here's this whole group of people that all support you in everything. And that and I mean, I directly said to a group of students, I was like, if you ever feel like there are people here who don't support you in that way, you need to come and tell me because I'll go see them.
Yeah.
Because
Okay,
it's my passion that they are here and are seen as a valued member of our community. Kind of going back to what I was saying with how international travel kind of changed my life in that it again helped me to recognize that all people have some core things that are important to them and that everybody just needs to be treated with kindness.
Yeah, that's so powerful and amazing. Do you feel like the tide is shifting a little bit with the you are welcome here and everything that's happening? A lot of schools do rely on international students to fulfill their enrollment targets and everything. But at the same time, there's a reverse challenge where now you're hearing a lot of, oh, there's not enough jobs already here, but now we're getting in all these international people. Like for me, in my opinion, just from my own example, I'm an international student, now an entrepreneur. I actually create jobs here, right? We have about 100 employees globally. So, how do you see all that? Like that reverse tide from one side, institutions saying, "Hey, we want to lobby to be able to get more students here because they're really good for the ecosystem," and then on
Mhm.
the other side, employers actually want internationals too, right? But employees, or I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but you get my point, right?
I do. And what I would say is I think it comes down to education because I think a lot of times people hear things and I think about things like AI and the internet and how quickly people can get information, but sometimes it's not necessarily accurate information.
Mm.
So people are getting information, they're hearing things that they're taking at face value and not actually digging in to see like, is this real? Or how pervasive is this really? So, a story gets put out there about something that then gets tied to a group of people and turned into that all of these people are the same.
Yeah.
That's not the reality, but that's what they hear, that's what they see, and then it's easy to kind of just make that the reality for the full group. So to me, it's an education piece that needs to be more pervasive of okay, what is it? So like, the Department of Education um, does a really nice job, I think, of putting information out there about the value that international students bring to the US economy. And unfortunately, I don't think that a lot of people ever actually see that information. So those types of things need to be more pervasive to the people that maybe are the naysayers or the ones that are kind of speaking the other side to say like, oh, well, they're taking jobs and all of these things. But to your point, in many aspects, they're creating jobs. Um, and so it's not all one-sided and it's not necessarily what people say, which sometimes it's easier to just say something that seems like, oh, well, yes, that's probably what's happening, but you don't have the facts to back that up.
Oh, absolutely. I fully agree with you, right? Because, I mean, if we just think of it, education is actually the fourth largest export for the United States. So that in itself, the fact that we bring in international students, brings in a ton of revenue, right?
100%.
Talking $1 trillion in revenue from just higher ed as an export. Beyond that, I think the State Department does a great job, unlike many other countries, which will suddenly like open the floodgates and say, oh my God, now it's too much, now close it, right? Like the UK went from like, oh, 2 year post-study work permit to one and closed. Now Canada is doing a bunch of that, right? It suddenly opened the floodgates. But the US has been very consistent in the fact that every year it has a limitation on how many work visas it gives as well, right? So, and we're talking work visas like 80,000 work visas a year, like
Right.
nothing compared to the
Right.
bazillion jobs that are available every year, of which a very small proportion goes to internationals. But international students still make a lot out of that 80,000, right? Because
Absolutely.
that's how you see a lot of companies at their highest level of leadership having international students. So I feel like it's really balanced and actually it's great the way it's set up. In fact, I feel it can open up a little more, right?
Yeah.
Just with just 80,000 a year, it's tough. It's tough considering about 300,000 came from India just this year. Like
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm with you on that. Yes, of course, illegal migration is always a challenge, and now suddenly we're also seeing students as part of that. Both from the south and from the north now because of all the tensions, especially the Canada-India tension, I think is creating a lot of things. But yeah, at a high level, I think we need to do more as a country, right? Than kind of reduce it. Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. One important question is now switching from kind of students and the global rhetoric around international uh, to your campus. And I know for someone like you, and I've heard these kind of stories a few times, the people who work for you, with you, under you, uh, I'm sure enjoy it. And a lot of them get on
I
that.
hope so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure a few of them are already in that trajectory, right? Being a director of enrollment somewhere, doing something. So, I forget her name. Was it Rachel who joined NASA?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. She joined AIRC.
AIRC, that's right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a great example of people who are working with you, moving up the ladder in our space. How do you feel about that?
So it's interesting. I think early in my career, whenever somebody would leave, I was kind of like, oh man. Um, but as I've become more seasoned, I feel like I have become much more excited for those people. Because I think in some ways I'm very much of an anomaly, in two ways. First, in that I have stayed at the same place for the last 20 years.
Amazing.
Um, and secondly, that I've had the opportunity to stay at the same place because I have not stayed at the same place in the same role.
Yeah, you've not
I've
stagnated. Yeah.
exactly like I've been very fortunate to kind of be able to move up the ladder at the same institution, which I know is not the normal situation for the vast majority of people. So when I have a staff member that has an amazing opportunity or even just a different opportunity, I'm excited for them. And I say to people when they first start working with and for me, um, that I want them to explore various things. So, yes, maybe this is your job, but if you have interest in something else or there's a skill set that you would like to develop, like let's talk about that. Let's find ways to allow you to learn those skills and to get to where you want to be because admissions is not a job that most people stay in for a long, long period of time. I mean, typically once you hit, I think it's like the 5 or 8 year mark, then you're pretty much in it.
Yeah.
Um, but especially some of our newer team members, want them to recognize that I certainly don't expect that they're always going to be here. And, I want them to be. Like, I love our team and think they're amazing, but I don't ever want to hold anybody back. Instead, I want to help lift them up to get to where they want to be able to have different experiences and to be able to share their skills and their knowledge with others. So it's important to me, obviously, that they work hard when they're here, but at the same time that they're also building their skills to get to where it is, wherever it is that they want to be. And if they want to, if that's, well, I want to be here for now, great. Like, that's fantastic. But if that shifts at some point, or, if things in your life change, I mean, again, I've been very, very fortunate. When I had my son, at the time, I was the director of international admission, and I was traveling for big portions of time. I mean, I would be gone for 6 weeks at a time. And I knew, like, that can't continue. I have a baby now, and I'm getting on a plane, and going anywhere for that matter, like, to, for any period of time. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to be shifted into a different role
Yeah.
that still allowed me to do a lot of the things that I enjoy. And so, although international is not the sole focus of my job, I feel like it has added so much value to the role that I'm in now, because a lot of times some of the higher leaders don't have that experience. And so when they're thinking about things, whether it's from a strategy perspective or a new product or a new process, international, depending upon where you are, if it's not an enormous part of your overall profile, can get missed. Whereas for me, because it's so much ingrained in what I was doing, that when I'm thinking about these things, that's always in the back of my head of like, okay, how is this going to impact the international students? How can we make this work for them too? Does this work for them too? So it's definitely been something that has benefited me in my career to be able to take the skills that I'm learning from international to move up the ladder. But at the same time, I want that same opportunity for the people that are working with and for me to be able to escalate to wherever it is that they want to go.
That's amazing. And that's very selfless in terms of how you think about it. And I feel like I've had these experiences too, like someone who stayed with me for 4 or 5 years. And I'm like, oh my God, you were there since inception. You know everything about iSchool. How could you leave? But a lot of those have actually turned into better moments, and I'm sure you're seeing some of that too. Like if Rachel's at AIRC now, I'm sure like Western New England has a little more of a voice at AIRC because Rachel's there, right? Like
Absolutely.
same for me. I'll sometimes be like, man, you're our best performing admissions counselor, but why are you going? But then you kind of have to let it go and move on. And then soon, at some point they'll like switch one job, and then the next job they'll actually become the India representative for an institution. And guess whom
Nice.
they're looking at first? iSchool.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's so much. I mean, it's a small world we live in. It's a tight-knit community, and
It is.
everybody. So
And I feel like too, with international in particular, that we all have this same passion. And so, sometimes with just general admission, there's this competitiveness where it's like, I don't want to share that. I don't want to tell you about that, whereas like with international, I feel like because we all have the passion, that we're much more open to sharing and to kind of asking for the advice and asking for, some support, because it's something that is bigger than just bringing in students, and not to devalue that in any way, because obviously that's a big part of what I do now. But just to say that that international piece has a very different flavor to it. And it's going back to this idea of providing for students that may otherwise not have that opportunity. And the fact that they're coming into a new culture and having, been somebody now that's traveled to places and gotten off a plane, similar to what you said. I mean, that resonated with me, my first trip to India, that I got off the plane and was like, oh, I thought I had done some research, but I don't know about this. Like, what?
Oh yeah.
Um,
Where did
yeah,
you
and I mean,
land the first time? Don't tell me Mumbai or like Mumbai is crazy to land.
I don't even remember where it was, to be honest with you, because I think it was like the middle of the night, and I was just like,
Oh.
oh boy, like, where am I?
Because a
Um,
lot of times when I talk to people, they'll be like, "Oh man, if you're going to India for the first time, don't land in Mumbai because it's in the middle of the one of the busiest cities in the world, right? And you land there, and the airport is beautiful and it's nice and calm. The minute you get out, and all the cars and the auto rickshaws honking at you, and it's too overwhelming, like in the first minute."
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, again, I don't remember exactly what city it was, but I remember walking outside and it was like the middle of the night, but it felt like it was like the middle of the afternoon because there were tons of people all over the place, like waiting for people, like cheering. And I was just like, what is happening? Like, why are all these people awake and here at the airport? Like, what is happening?
Yeah, oh my God, Misha. I still feel that after being in the US for 10 years, I'm like, it's really eerie out here. Like, because when I get out, like in the US, we're not used to just hanging out at midnight. No.
No, no. And yeah, it's just a different experience.
It's a very different experience. And in some ways it's really great. I mean, we have a team in Mumbai and Delhi, right? And they'll work hard sometimes till the middle of the night because they're matching our hours. But then after that, instead of going home, they'll actually go hang out at the bar together. Like it's like, oh, it's just midnight. So it's pretty. But outside of India, any like surprise special moments in your visits that you were not expecting?
Well, there's been lots of things that I didn't expect, is what I would say,
I'm sure.
in many places that I've been. I mean,
Russia's an interesting one. I go to
what's that?
Russia. Russia's an interesting one. You said you were there. Yeah, I go
Yeah.
there. My wife is from Russia, so I go there.
Thanks.
Yeah, and it's an incredible place. It's just become really difficult for even students to come out here from Russia, and obviously the war.
Absolutely. And
But
those are all, I mean, I feel like every place that I've gone, there have been various things that were kind of unexpected or that were um, just not what I was used to. So, like even with Russia, and this to some extent spoke to the history and at the same time. So I'm going to kind of give you two different stories. So the first is the history side, and the second is more of the I was completely taken off guard, is what I would
yeah,
say. So the first was, we were going through the city, we're walking down into the subway, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is beautiful.
isn't it? Yeah.
And well, and our tour guide was like, yeah, she wasn't the tour, she was like leading our group from Russia, and she was like, yeah, it's beautiful. And kind of like didn't say anything more. And I was like, I don't understand. Like, this is so impressive. And she was like, do you know the history behind when this was built and what was happening in the country? And it just kind of took me back a little bit because I was like, wow, okay. Like at the time when this was being built, people were starving to death. And
Yes.
the government was dumping money into putting marble into the subway. And it just was one of those things where, when you're looking at it through a lens that's not the lens of the people that are there, that you just think about it so differently. So something that I was looking at as so beautiful, she was looking at as like this like wound from the
Yes.
so again, speaking to perspective.
Yeah.
So
So much.
kind of a heavy one.
So much, yeah. Like the flips. I mean, I'm from India, and like there's so much. Just thinking of how people perceive these things and the context. Like in Mumbai, the number one uh, tourist site is the Victoria Memorial, right? The Gateway of India. And
Yep.
it's the most celebrated thing, but it's like it was the place where Queen Victoria was first she first landed in India. So there's like this whole like colonial context that people actually don't care about, right?
Right. Right.
Like, yeah, oh,
Exactly.
this is
But
the gateway of India. Right. Yeah.
exactly. But it
Uh,
has big implications for the people that it really did impact at the time.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, yeah. Like, but in Russia, I feel like there the cultural context is, yeah, it's great, but hey, listen, there's history. Like, and we're not happy with that history. Yeah. Whereas in
It,
India, like in some cases they forget and they're just like, oh yeah, you know what? We're going to appreciate how good this place looks and bring people here. It's
yep.
amazing.
So the funnier side of this story is
Yeah.
in Russia the first time, and the same tour guide. We were at a hotel and we were going to dinner, and it's winter, and and I live in Massachusetts, so I get winter, like we're
Yeah.
good. And the restaurant was probably less than a quarter mile walk. And so we were like, we'll walk. Like, it's fine. There was a group of us. We'll walk. We're all good. We were all from schools that were up in either New England or in areas that were very well aware of winter. And she's like, no, we should take a taxi. And we were like, no, we'll walk. Like, it's really fine. So she took a taxi and we walked.
Really
And
funny.
we got into the restaurant, and the first thing they did was offer, which I hope this is PC, but they offered us a shot of vodka. And we were all like, we are so cold. Like, I have never been this cold in my whole life, and thought I would be fine. And I am not a drinker. I was like, yep, I'll take it.
I'll take whatever it takes to survive.
Absolutely. And she got out of the cab and came in and was like, how are you guys doing? And we were like, can we take a cab back? And she was just like, yeah, like cold here is not like cold where you're from.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and my wife, she's from Siberia, so extreme northeast Russia. Oh,
Okay.
that cold is cold. Like I was scared because when we first landed, and now I'm used to it, but when we first landed, the pilot's like, hey, listen, yeah, the weather's bad, but also the runway's gonna be bad. Don't worry, we'll be fine. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is like, one of those like, guys, turbulence, like, please tighten your seat belts or whatever. No, but the plane lands and skids sideways, because it's all icy on the runway. But you see all the people are just like calm, like they're literally like, we're going in this direction, the plane is flipped and we're like kind of sliding, but yeah, they're used to it. They're
They're
used.
used to it. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there's like
They know
this
how to.
famous picture of like people pushing a commercial airline because it's winter and the engines are like frozen and whatever. Like it's just a funny place, but I love it. I love it. That's the thing about cultures we learn when we travel, and I hope everybody gets to travel a little bit, right?
Oh my gosh. It's just an amazing experience. It really helps you to value the things that you have. And at the same time, again, kind of going back to what I feel like I've said multiple times, so I hate to be reiterative, but at the same time, it's just so important to see that although people are different around the world, and honestly, even within the United States, that at the end of the day, there are core things that are important to all of us. And so
Yeah.
just being kind to one another, because you just never know what's going on in somebody else's life. And so, like you can have opinions about things that I don't agree with, but that doesn't make you a bad person. And so really just kind of getting back to that core, I think is so incredibly important. I mean, I even think about things with like people with different religious beliefs and things like that. Like I took a class in college, which also really helped shape who I am today, that was on religions of the world.
Hmm.
And the core principle of the course was to get to the key of like all of these various religions, what do they have in common? And it helped, I think, everybody in the class to really stop thinking about like, okay, well, if I'm this religion, I'm right. And if you're that religion, you're wrong. It was more of a, where are the commonalities? And look, there are so many things that it might be a different name or a slightly different tweak on it, but the theme is pretty much the same across the board.
Absolutely, it's roughly the same. I mean, I was raised Catholic, and community was big, and I did a lot in church, served mass 4 times a week, and all that stuff. And then now I live in Utah, and it's like extremely Mormon, right? The Mormon church, and but a lot of the themes are typically the same. There's still the same sort of values. Some enforced more, some enforced less,
Yep,
But yeah, in the end, it's the sense of community. You have to stick to your values. You know, some people call it God, some people call it karma. Like this
exactly.
different, they're different names to the same thing. So I love it. And that's a great way to gift wrap this podcast and put a nice blue ribbon on it. That in the end, it's all about kindness. In the
Absolutely.
all about people, and you exude that every time you speak, you interact. I, people around you feel it. I feel it. That's the reason for the first time I stopped by. I said, I'm at NAFSA. This is like the Woodstock of international admissions. What do I do? And I like searched my way through and I said, oh, study Massachusetts. Okay, sounds familiar. I lived there back then. I went to Bentley, and so maybe I could go talk to someone there. And I go to Education USA, and there's all the states, and they study Massachusetts, and you're sitting there. And I just came and said hi, and that's how our friendship started.
Yep. Yep.
At NAFSA, I think 2017 or 18,
Wow.
remember. But
Wow.
yeah, but since then, Michelle, I've always looked up to you for all the work you do for the space, and for being you're one of our customers. You're a good friend. I can call you anytime. Thank you for everything.
Absolutely. Well, and I have very much valued kind of the opportunity. I feel like we don't get to talk as often as we might like. But at the same time, it's always nice to know that, you know, to see how you've grown and the example that you've set for other international students, as well as just how much you have done for the overall industry, has been amazing. And I really value our friendship and our partnership, and just being able to have these conversations.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Michelle. And thank you to all our listeners for joining another fabulous episode of EDU Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, and our amazing guest for today, Michelle Kowalsky from Western New England University. Thank you, everybody.